China is accused of locking up hundreds of thousands of Muslims without trial in its western region of Xinjiang. The government denies the claims, saying people willingly attend special vocational schools which combat terrorism and religious extremism. Since 1978, the Constitution of the People's Republic of China guarantees freedom of religion. Most Chinese citizens were allowed to worship as they felt best. Muslims of the Hui Mandarin-speaking ethno-religious group, for instance, are guaranteed as the right to fast, wear the veil, and go to Hajj. However, the state's discourse on tolerance will prove to be conditional and only applicable to certain groups. The Xinjiang Conflict centers around the Uyghurs, a Turkic Muslim minority predominantly present in the far west province of Xinjiang. Unlike the Muslim Huis, the ethno-religious group does not speak Mandarin and is characterized by separatist ideals. Backed by Al-Qaeda or the Taliban, some Uyghur separatist groups, such as the Turkestan Islamic Party, will often rely on terrorist attacks to express their discontent. The Chinese state, as a response, suppresses their rights as ethnic and religious minorities and will often violently clash with separatist groups. The Xinjiang Autonomous Region is located in China's north far west, and it is its largest administrative region. For centuries, crossroads of religions, dynasties, languages, ethnicities, and trade routes like the famous Silk Road has given the region an extremely fascinating history. Both Uyghurs and Han Chinese historically claimed the area. Their tensions and cultural differences are the core of this conflict. To understand the situation nowadays, it is necessary to take a step back in the history of the region, characterized by ethnic, political, and economic discord. Firstly, the region has not always been part of China. For centuries, it was contested by Chinese, Turkic groups, and Mongols until the Chinese Qing dynasty gained the control in the 18th century. After some struggle due to the Russian influence of the area, China formally set up the Xinjiang province in 1884. In 1912, the Qing dynasty fell and the region was ruled by various warlords. Uyghurs' call for autonomy has never decreased. Xinjiang lived a period of intermittent autonomy and experienced a brief period of independence in the 1940s. In 1944, a Uyghur separatist state, the East Turkestan Republic, was declared with the support of the Soviet Union. Soon after, in 1949, the new communist China regained control over the region and established the autonomous region in 1955. At this point, the economy developed fast and the Chinese Communist government started to encourage a Han Chinese migration towards Xinjiang region to settle the new industrial towns and farming villages. The result was a massive presence of Han Chinese inhabitants as the far west bastion of the country. The aim of their presence was to take control over separatist movements among Uyghurs, ensuring unity and loyalty to the Chinese authorities. In the 1990s, the collapse of the Soviet Union and the emergence of independent Muslim states in Central Asia led to an increasing tension and reawakening of Uyghur separatist groups. Anti-Han and separatist sentiments flared into violence on occasion. Beijing suppressed demonstrations and intensified controls on the region. The Han Chinese migration didn't stop, and many young and technically qualified people continued to arrive in the region. On one hand, they were offered the best jobs. On the other hand, Uyghur commercial and cultural activities were gradually curtailed by the state. Unequal treatment and severe restrictions on Islam intensified Uyghur complaints and resentment. Protests resumed and spread in 2008, coinciding with the Olympic Games in Beijing.
More than 100 human rights activists rallied in Tokyo on Wednesday to protest the passing of the Olympic torch through East Turkestan, a Chinese Communist Party-controlled region populated by ethnic minority Muslim Uyghurs. Their protest came after a report on Monday indicated that Chinese authorities in the restive far west region of Xinjiang demolished a mosque for refusing to put up signs supporting this August's Beijing Olympics.
In 2009, a large-scale and bloody ethnic rioting took place in Urumqi, the regional capital, and nearly 200 people, most of them Han Chinese, were killed. The Chinese government sent large numbers of troops to patrol the streets, and many Uyghurs were detained as suspects. In 2013, there was a sudden upsurge in violence. In October 2013, a car plowed into a crowd and burst into flames in Beijing's Tiananmen Square. 5 people were killed and dozens injured. Chinese authorities have blamed the Tiananmen Square attack on the East Turkestan Islamic movement, which was recently reformed as the Turkestan Islamic Party.
China has previously accused Islamic separatists who want to establish an independent East Turkestan for being responsible for attacks in the region. In 2009, tensions erupted between ethnic Uyghurs and the majority Han Chinese, leaving more than 200 people dead and thousands more injured.
This lays bare the terrorist essence of this organization, and it also allows those people who recently suspected the nature of the incident to clearly see the truth, stated the Foreign Ministry spokesman Xinjiang. The escalation of violence didn't halt. Citizens have become the target, and there was a shift towards larger scale incidents. A long list of attacks can be drawn up during 2014.
Pictures from Chinese television show the 8 suspects being sentenced in June. They were convicted of murdering government officials, founding a terrorist organization, and attacking police stations. Authorities say 3 of those convicted were behind an attack in central Beijing in which a car plowed through a crowd in Tiananmen Square in October last year, killing 5 people.
Exiled Uyghurs groups accuse China of exaggerating the threat in order to justify ethnic repression. Policemen and controls are spread all over the region, mostly where Uyghurs represent the majority of population. They live a form of house arrest, home invasion, and digital surveillance. Chinese government launched a year-long campaign against terrorism, reinforcing security and military control in the region. In August 2018, there was evidence of the fact that more than 1 million people were being held in counter-extremist centers in Xinjiang. A system of internment camps for Muslims in Xinjiang was created. Only last year, the first reports of the critical situation emerged. Looking at satellite images, the site between 2017 and 2018 proves a clear evidence. A patch of empty, untouched, ashen gray sand was substituted by a highly secure compound. It is just one of many similar prison-type structures built across the region in the past few years. According to China, they provide essential vocational training for individuals influenced by the 3 evil forces: extremism, radicalism, terrorism, which threatens stability in the region. The largest known camp has room for up to 130,000 inmates. The program appears to be accelerating and the situation to be worsening. The actors directly involved in this conflict are made up of governments, pressure groups, civilians, and terrorist groups. The People's Republic of China believes that Xinjiang has been a Chinese territory for over 2,000 years. The decades of tension between the 2 groups have seen Uyghur freedom of movement and religion being restricted significantly by the Chinese Communist Party, such as bans on fasting during Ramadan and children attending Islamic schools within Xinjiang. The region has been described as a fully evolved police state. Despite this, some Han Chinese believe that Uyghur people are benefiting from Chinese occupation. They receive preferential admissions into universities, were exempt from the one-child policy, and there has been large investments and developments in the region. The Uyghur people believe they are descendants of those who were indigenous to Xinjiang. They fear they are being eradicated as an ethnic, cultural group. There is no one group that represents native Uyghurs. Each group uses different strategies for different goals. Founded in 2004, the World Uyghur Congress is an international organization of exiled Uyghur groups based in Germany. They oppose the Chinese occupation of East Turkestan and campaign peacefully for the protection of human rights of Uyghur people. They do this by pressuring national governments, particularly the United States, and supranational bodies like the European Union and the United Nations. Some of their most widespread actions have happened just this year, including demonstrations across 15 cities and 14 countries and a 2,000-person march in Brussels demanding the release of 1 million Uyghurs from the re-education camps. The Chinese government claims that the World Uyghur Congress has links with terrorist organizations. However, WUC, international media, and most other governments do not agree with this claim. Founded in the late 1980s, the TIP is a Uyghur jihadi group fighting for independence for East Turkestan and the establishment of an Islamic State. The group is not limited to China. It has a faction involved in Syria and is partly based in Pakistan and Afghanistan. The group has been responsible for over 200 terrorist attacks between 1990 and 2001, and according to the Chinese government, they have also orchestrated civil unrest and riots. The government hopes that by tightening restrictions, increasing surveillance, and re-education, that they might mitigate the threat posed by separatists. However, the question remains as to whether or not this will cross opposition or simply fuel it. The Chinese government's treatment of the Uyghur population and the Xinjiang conflict results in numerous human rights violations. Since most of the Uyghur population are Sunni Muslim, China frames the conflict in Xinjiang as war on terror. Anti-terror laws have been passed by the Chinese authorities that repress and control religious practices, devoiding the people of free religious pursuit, freedom of expression, and basic civil and political rights. A large number of Uyghurs have been captured and detained on the pretext of being involved in terrorism-related activities. The ambiguous definition of terrorism by the Chinese government and criminalization of the Uyghur population's religious acts have a larger implication of fueling the spread of anti-Islamic sentiments throughout China. The outcome of this conflict dangers on erasing the culture of 11 million people. Unjust treatment has also been observed locally for all Uyghurs regardless of education and economic standing. It is also known that the captured Uyghurs are treated inhumanely, almost facing torture-like treatments. The actions taken by the Chinese government spurs nationalistic sentiments within the Han Chinese. The conflict in Xinjiang has had numerous negative outcomes for the 11 Uyghurs which call Xinjiang their home. Tens of thousands of Uyghurs have been leaving China over a period of years before the Chinese government blocked off all later departures out of the country. This conflict has also affected Chinese citizens outside of the Xinjiang region. Less attention has been paid to the mobilization of more than 1 million Chinese civilians to aid the military and police in their campaign by occupying the homes of the region's Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities, and undertaking programs of indoctrination and surveillance. The outside Chinese civilians live with the Uyghur family, referring to themselves as relatives. They take notes of suspicious activities and any sign of wavering commitment to the Chinese government. The conflict has sparked contrasting attitudes among states regionally and internationally. The Uyghur population's language and culture have much more in common with those of people across Central Asia and Turkey than with the Hans. Despite the fact that the Uyghur population shares commonalities with Central Asian states, China was capable of convincing the governments of Central Asian countries on their stance towards the Uyghurs in China. This is possibly due to the Central Asian states' fear of China's territorial expansion and domination of the region. Turkey, on the other hand, referred to the treatment of the Uyghur population as a genocide and openly called for the abandonment of the assimilation policy. Although the conflict involves a large Islamic community, Islamic nations have been neutral about the conflict in Xinjiang. Arab states, such as Egypt and Saudi Arabia, usually known to stand up for the repressed Muslim minorities in other countries, are surprisingly quiet on the issue. possibly due to the strategic economic ties these states have with China. The response from the United States has been an attempt to balance the USA's long-standing concern for the human rights of ethnic and religious minorities in China, with its broader strategic and economic interest in which China is perceived to be playing an ever greater role. The increasing attention given to the tensions between the Uyghurs and the Chinese government highlights the multidimensional nature of internal conflicts. It is first and foremost, indeed, a conflict between the state and the diverse separatist groups claiming to represent the ethno-religious minority group. However, with the recent increasing visibility of the conflict, the international community has taken notice of the decades-long feud. Therefore, the Xinjiang conflict involves and concerns a multitude of diverse players. On the local level, the Uyghur groups and the Chinese state. On the international level, the international organizations and states. Moreover, its multidimensionality is also explained by the diversity of the stakes at hand: national and international security, human rights protection, national sovereignty, and identity.